everyone. It's only two of us today, but we are still on board at the table. I guess we usually do our intro, but I'm Virginia, aka Gigi.
I'm Nika. This is
A word at the table.
all right. A word of the table it is. How are you doing today, Gigi?
I'm doing well. It was a long day, to be honest. It was a long day, but overall, I'm doing well. I can't complain.
Yeah, I think we typically don't record in the evenings. So I think
Mm.
I don't know if the energy is low. Sorry.
Right. Yeah, we're usually like an afternoon type of group and we get it together.
Like
Yeah.
midday afternoon.
Right, brunch hours type of podcast. But I mean, hey, we're here.
Yep.
So mhm.
All right. Well, I guess so. Vicky's not with us today, but she will be joining in future episodes. Um, But today we're going to do a follow up on our previous episode where we discussed toxic toxic relationships. And in that episode, we talked about, I guess it stemmed from the relationship between, or the argument or confrontation between Megan Thee Stallion and Tory Lanez. And we talked about, natural anger, because everybody gets angry, and rage, and when does it cross the line in relationships to become abusive. And we also highlighted Tahiri from Marriage Boot Camp, and the fact that her husband or boyfriend partner choked her out on TV in front
In public.
yes, in front of an audience, in front of other couples. And we wanted to do this follow-up to talk about, like, because sometimes I think when you see these physical abuses, it's obvious that you can say, okay, that's a toxic relationship and there's something in that relationship that's not right. But today, I think we wanted to talk about, those subtleties that could be hard to detect in relationships, in a quote unquote normal relationship. And I guess that's where I want to start. Like, first of all, how do you define what a normal or a good relationship is? What is that to you?
I would say a good relationship to me is, I mean, it could be a bunch of things, but I definitely think that like the respect for the other person needs to be there. Like not like like making sure that the other person does feel valued.
Yes.
I think that, like small things, even with the whole value aspect, like just making sure you're not putting someone down, like, you're not condescending to them type of thing. But like, I would say a good relationship is something that there's a mutual respect. It's beneficial for like both parties, I would say. And I think like, and of course, hopefully, not hopefully, but God should be in that relationship as well.
Yeah.
And I do also think that sometimes, and not all the time, but like sometimes like that relationship is like not only beneficial for the two people, but it's beneficial to others. Like I think like even our relationship, like we've had a friendship for like so many years now, and we have a podcast and we talk about certain topics that people listen to, and sometimes we get feedback from people like, oh yeah, that was great, you guys talked about it and blah 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 or whatever. We've just grown our relationship so much, and I think it's sometimes bigger than those two people. Not all the time, but
Yeah.
I think that sometimes you can it kind of leads to a like people are attracted to it in a sense, if that makes sense. But, yeah.
Okay. So I think from what you said, so to you, a good relationship is pretty much a partnership where both parties or all parties in it, well, we'll say both because we're talking about binary relationship. There are thruples and more, but we're talking about binary. Um, so both parties have a voice, and they feel like they can express themselves and be their full selves. And also, too, for some relationships, many relationships, if it's important to you, it should contribute to something outside of just the two people in it. Okay,
Right.
so I agree with that. So I think on that, to me, I think, when you look at or define a good relationship in the perspective of how do you detect toxicities within that good relationship? Because nothing is perfect. There's always bumps in the road whenever you bring two people or several people from different backgrounds together. So a good relationship to me is a relationship that runs smoothly, but also, like, you can be your full self, you can enjoy your life as an individual, you can pursue your career goals, your dreams and whatnot, and activities beyond the relationship. But also you have to know that you are this couple, this unit that is doing life together, and in your pursuit of pursuing your own self-fulfillment, that you make time to maintain that good relationship. Because even if you look at you have an old car, you're going to bring that old car to the repair shop all the time. Is your relationship one that is always breaking down and you got to bring into the repair shop? Or is it just one where you're just doing your maintenance, like the oil change and your filter change and, like tires and things like that? And yeah, there are some times where you got to leave it in the shop for a couple of days, but like, how are you maintaining it? So
I just want to say that's a good analogy, and I think and what's the fuel that's pushing the car?
yes.
Like what's going in the car? Is it like support? Is it love? Is it like joy? Like just making sure your other partner is like happy, or is it like just pettiness or hate or like other things that can sometimes fill your car? I guess sometimes it might be that, but if that's all that's running your car is gonna break down.
Yeah, like that's a good point. Like, if, for example, you're in a relationship and the only times where you guys are happy or the happiest with each other is after a big argument, like, is that healthy, first of all? Yeah, I think whenever you have tough moments and make up, it always puts it in perspective and makes the relationship sweeter in the moment. But if happiness only exists in that like realm, then I think there's probably some things that need to be addressed. Yeah. So I think my next question then. So, and I think we touched on it a little bit, but how do you identify that you're in an abusive relationship, or that your relationship could turn, or that you're dating a partner that could become an abuser in the future? Because I think, one thing is, sometimes when you're victimized, whether it's the woman who's the victimizer, or the victim, or the man is doing the man is the one that's being abused, you may not know until like it hits you right in the face. But I'm trying to, today in our discussion, to get to the point or the place where we could say, here are some highlights of maybe some hints that you can say, okay, this is not going in the right direction.
Yeah. I think I don't think that there's like a clear, clean cut definition of something that's like, okay, this person has to go. However, I think a good indicator or a good like okay, I need to watch out for this, is like the way they resolve conflict. Because I feel like, you know, obviously conflict happens all the time. Like, that's just what people, we get annoyed of each other, like it happens. But if it's like, if conflict is something that, you know, they kind of shut down, or they like, you know, they don't necessarily like speak their, or even if they do speak, it's condescending, or they just blame everything on you. I think that's a good, I'm not saying that, you know, that's the only way you should judge the person, but like I feel like a good way to know like if this is someone that you can deal with is like how they handle conflict and what they do in those situations, and how like you guys resolve issues, because problems are always going to come. Problems are
Yeah.
always going to come. That's something that's just life. Like, you know, like even to the point when you have kids and like their kid comes home and your kid's getting bullied. Like, do I have a partner that's going to sit there and, you know, talk with me and our child together, or a partner that's just going to be like, let's go get the kid and like beat him up? Like, you know, like how do they handle those situations? So I
Yeah.
think noticing how someone handles conflict, and of course other things too, like it's not just that, but that to me, I think would be something I'd be like, he kind of does this in conflict, or like the last way we handled that situation, we just stopped talking or whatever. I think that could be like a huge thing for me in a relationship.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I looked up on Psychology Today, which is, it's a good resource to find like a therapist and things like that. Um, so I looked up, you know, ways to identify abusive or toxic relationships. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to read like a little small paragraph about what they said. Typically, an abuser will lavish attention on a woman at the, and again, caveat to this is talking about the woman being the person being abused and the man doing the abusing, but either party can do it. So that's a disclaimer before, as I read this. So typically, an abuser will lavish attention on a woman at the beginning of the relationship. Over time, he becomes jealous, monitors her whereabouts, and restricts her interactions with others. His partner thinks the original helpful man is the real him, and if she does things the right way, he'll go back to being wonderful again. At times, he may indeed act loving, but if this seems, it may be because it seems like the best way to maintain his control. Loving acts become another controlling tactic for abusers. So that's one way of like generally identifying traits of an abuser. So in the beginning of your relationship, it's always blissful. But once that blissful period is over, where does your relationship stand? And how does this person interact with you? Do they make you feel, you know, do they do things that, you know, make you feel like they're trying to control your life? And sometimes I think that, for example, if you have a partner that says, you know, we have to go to the gym 3 times a week. It could be that, you know, he cares about your health or, you know, maybe he thinks you could lose a little bit of weight, and that's fine. But if, you know, he puts it, if you know, miss a couple of days at the gym for a couple of weeks, and, you know, that becomes a huge problem in your relationship, maybe that should give you pause and say, okay, I understand that he is expressing, you know, this workout thing because, you know, he's concerned about my health. But if it's going too strongly the other way, maybe that's a warning sign that this is a controlling side of him that may manifest it another way. Today it might be the gym, but tomorrow it could be something else. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, like when someone is controlling like that, it's definitely a form of abuse. Like it's so many ways that people can be abusive. It could
Yes.
be whether they're controlling, it could be whether they are, they just lack having patience, they're just impatient with you, or like,
Mm-hmm.
whether someone's cheating on you. I think all of those things can be very abusive in a toxic relationship, because let's just say it's just the example of someone cheating on you. Like sometimes that kind of messes with you in your head, in the sense of like, you're like, oh my gosh, like what was wrong with me that this person cheated on me? Like it just messes with you, and it had nothing to do with you. It literally had nothing to the person, like the person's controlling, like that controlling, quality of them had nothing to do with you. They had it before, they met you and before they got into this relationship, and maybe it just comes out in the relationship. But these are things that people, I think, just need to deal with prior to getting into relationships. Like, there should be no reason you're in a relationship if you just have a wandering eye and you just want to be with everybody. Like, no,
Yes.
like deal with that first before involving someone else and then like abusing them in the relationship. So I definitely think it has a lot to do with like the heart, and like, you know how like the Bible always says like God searches your heart to see things that like, he needs to clean and take out. And I think those are some things that people just kind of go by and go straight into a relationship without like
Yeah.
really like fixing themselves before getting into a relationship. And not saying that you have to be perfect, not saying that you have to be perfect, but like, like things that that you need to deal with. Like, I know I have an anger problem. I need to like learn how to deal with that before getting into a relationship. And then I just, I'm just yelling at the person I'm with every time we have an issue. So yeah, I definitely think that there's just so many different forms of it, and those are things people should work on before involving someone else.
Yeah, and I mean, all of the things that you said were on point, but I think another thing is like, as far as like infidelity, some
Mm.
people I think that, okay, I'm a promiscuous person and I have a wandering eye, but once I make the decision to commit myself to one person, this is gonna be, like it's gonna be it, because I'm gonna have this person all the time. But I think like when you have that mentality, what you fail to address is, what was the reason why you were promiscuous? What was the reason why you felt like you needed multiple
Mm-hmm.
partners and attention from multiple, like different sources? Because
Mm-hmm.
when you get into that committed relationship, whether it's like boyfriend and girlfriend dating, or whether it's a marriage, it's like the love within your marriage will never be enough, because
Mm-hmm.
it always feels better when you're getting love from many different sources.
Mm-hmm.
That's just human nature. Like if you're
Yeah.
getting validation from 10 people, it feels better than getting validation from one person. So
Right.
like, what was the reason behind that? And like address that part and find out what it is in you and fix that before
Mm-hmm.
you try to get in a marriage, or a relationship, because the relationship won't fix your problem. It won't fix you. um and
Right.
I Yeah, you have something to add?
Oh, and I was just gonna say that like sometimes people also get into relationships thinking that they can like fix people.
Yeah.
Like they have this thing like, oh, I know that he's going through whatever, and I can be that lending that shoulder that he can cry. And it's like, no, sis, he
Mm,
needs to, or he or she needs to, get
can't
through that
fix
on their
it.
own.
Yeah.
Like only God can change that. You can't change that. Like you end up in an entanglement. So yeah.
Yeah, that's true. And I think like that's something that we often mistake ourselves to think that, like, I could just love this person so hard and he'll be motivated to change, or she'll be motivated to change.
Mm.
No, that oftentimes, probably the majority of the time, it doesn't turn out to be that way. So if someone is broken and you identify brokenness in that person, if you can't accept that brokenness,
Mm.
then you need to walk away from the relationship, because no one will ever come to the table perfect.
Right.
Everybody's going to have faults, but
Mhm.
can you really truly accept that person's fault? I think I saw a quote from Viola Davis, or maybe it was just like a short clip. She was doing an interview with her husband about relationships, and I think they've been married for a long time. And what she said is, when you're committing to someone for the long term, whether that's like a long-term partnership or a marriage, what
Mhm.
you need to express or explore or discover is, can I marry the everyday version of this person? Because if
Wow.
you're dating, it's like, yeah, you go on dates and it's exciting, you're discovering things together, and maybe you're like traveling and taking frequent vacations, and like there's more of a romantic aspect to dating. But when you get in a marriage, it's you're doing life together. You go to work, come home, go to sleep. Sometimes you may not even talk throughout the course of the day, and barely talk before you knock out to go to sleep. Like, can you
Mhm.
deal with that aspect of the person? And
Right.
does that aspect bring you happiness? And yeah,
Mhm.
the person's faults. How do you accept it, or are you hoping, this is something that bothers me and I'm just hoping he'll change?
Mhm.
Like, yeah, you can have that to a certain extent, but I think that for the most part, when you hope something about somebody will change, you're just setting up yourself for failure, because it may or may not change. Um,
Mm.
so
And in the situation where you do hope that the person changes, I would also say that the other person needs to show you that they're trying to work on that. Like, I can't
yeah,
sit here and be like, I cheated on you and I asked you for your forgiveness and we got past that, but I'm still like coming home late. I'm still doing things that will make you wonder if I'm cheating. Like, no, like if you forgave me and we're working on this together, I'm going to try my best to make you feel comfortable that it won't happen again. Like, I can't
yes,
just expect your forgiveness to be like the end game for that. Like, no, now I have to put in the work to make sure that that leads to a process of action. Because I think also too, when we think about like forgiving someone, it's like a one-time thing. Like, you're just like, oh, that person forgave me, like, okay. And it's like, no, it's a process. Like, we talked about this, now you have to do your part. Like, you forgave, it's like two people have to do two things.
yeah.
Because it's like the person that forgives, you have to actually forgive, because you can drive that person crazy. And the
Hmm.
person who did the wrongdoing, and if you're like, I'm sorry, let's work on it, you got to actually work to help the person with that process to forgive. So I think, like, if it is something that you feel like you can deal with, or whatever that red flag is, or whatever it is, and that person does say, okay, let's work on it, it takes two for sure. Because there are things that some people get through cheating, some people do get past that, but I think it definitely takes a lot of work.
Yeah, and I think the last episode we mentioned Pastor John Gray, and
Ooh.
and and we can like talk about it briefly. Like, I think I was looking up, you know, uh, some of the gossip pages and what they had to say about Pastor John Gray. John Gray, or Pastor John Gray, has admitted to, he called it listening to the wrong voices and letting some people get too close that he shouldn't have let them get too close.
Mm.
Um, so I think that, I don't know exactly like the details of it, but it was some form of infidelity, whether he actually fully committed, you know, whatever, cheating on his wife. I don't know, but he got involved, whether it was emotionally or, like text messaging or sexting or whatever with other women. And he, I think, apologized perhaps to his congregation, And I think earlier this year, he made a comment like he was having suicidal thoughts, and TD Jakes prayed for him. Um,
Oh.
but I saw like a quote from his wife. I didn't watch the video of her saying it,
Mhm.
but it said something along the lines of, so you want me to leave my husband because you spoke to the 16-year-old that couldn't get a date and he listened. So I'm supposed to leave my husband because you spoke to a place of brokenness that had not yet been submitted back to the Father, like Father as in God. But because I know the tricks of the enemy, I'm learning them every day. I can stand here in boldness for everybody that tried to sneak in. Thank you, because I got closer to God because of it. I got in that word. Come on. I put the scripture on that strange woman, and she's referring to the woman who he cheated on her with. And I
Mm.
put scripture on that strange woman, and she don't want it with me, and she don't want it with y'all. Amen. And that was, I mean, to
That
me,
sounds a little
it's like
aggressive.
all over the place, and it's like, huh, what did I just read? But I think to
Right.
me, like, that sounds like she's pretty much saying she's putting the blame on the enemy, and she
Mm.
is not putting the onus on her husband
Right.
having fault. And even if you plan to forgive him, um, I think you need to also, he needs to realize where he went wrong and where he wronged you and admit that. Not just say, oh, I'm going to pray for that woman. Because even if, for example, even if somebody comes in your marriage, like if I'm a married woman and a man comes like talk to me, if
Mm.
I fall for that instead of my husband, I am at fault. It's not the man's fault.
Right.
And you can't be like, oh, well, the devil used him. Yeah, maybe the devil used him and he has some responsibility in it, but I have to assume my own responsibility because I'm the one who's in the commitment, not him.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
so I think that's where she failed. And, like this was, I think, back in the fall of last year. And earlier this summer, some other woman, came out with that he allegedly was communicating with her inappropriately, asking her for inappropriate pictures,
Wow.
sending her pictures of himself in his underwear, complaining about his wife. And it's like, this is the
Mm.
pastor of a mega church, and you have a
Right.
public platform. So the problem there must be deep.
Mm.
That's how
Yeah.
I see it.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with you. I think we often look at we're looking at the results of something deeper. Like we're looking at like I don't know if I want to compare it to like a vine or something. I don't know, but like it's not the root of the situation. Like the root of the situation is obviously deeper. Like it's not cheating. There's something deeper there that you, like we were talking about, you haven't dealt with
Yeah.
before you getting married. Like why do you feel the need that you have to have the attention of another woman? Or if your wife isn't giving you
Yeah.
attention, why do you feel like the need to have that fulfilled by someone else outside of your marriage? Like marriage is such a, like it's a covenant before God. So it's just like, like even though, everybody goes through that through a marriage, sometimes you go through loneliness, things like that. But why do you feel the need to do that? And then that's what we were talking about before, as far as like dealing with those things before getting married. And I think with his situation, it's just even like at the end of the day, he's a man. At the end of the day, he's a man. So, and she's a woman. So we all make mistakes, but it's just the fact that he's like a pastor, I think,
Mm-hmm.
to me, because it's like, you're supposed to be that standard that we look up to. So it's just, oh man, it's heartbreaking because I definitely, I have I feel a certain way about marriage. Like I feel deeply about it. And so for someone to just like, you know, like, oh yeah, it was the enemy. No, you made a commitment before God, and whatever those situations or those demons you had, you should have handled that prior to the marriage. Or, you know, if you were really struggling, like go to therapy, do some self-evaluation, go, you know, spend time with God, like go deal with those things before involving someone else. So I don't know. That's really sad. I hope that, you know, I don't even know what the solution to that problem is, but I hope that they get to the root of the situation, because it's not the cheating. Like I think people always look at the cheating. It's not that.
No.
It's deeper than that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and I think I mean, not to focus specifically on cheating only, because there are, like we said in the beginning, like there's various levels of abuse, and the way that somebody could have toxicities in a relationship. Now, as far since this is a Christian podcast, we're obviously talking from a Christian perspective. I know that there are people who have open relationships, for example, where one partner is okay with the other partner stepping out of the relationship and pursuing relations outside of that relationship. To me, that's something that doesn't have room, that there's no room for that in a Christian marriage. But I don't know if there would be a Christian that disagrees with that. Maybe like, but to me, I don't think there's room for it. And if like you're married to, you know, if you're married to your husband of, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years, and he comes to you and say, well, babe, I think we should open this up. I think we need to explore relationships outside of just the two of us. Like, how do you handle that? Like, to me, that's something within a relationship that may have been good, but that's creeping into like, is this getting to a place where it's unhealthy or toxic? Because it's like, well, is that, I guess if both parties decide that that's what they want, maybe it's okay for them. But again, it's still not Christian, but it's okay for them. But I think if you know, the husband or the wife brings this up and the other person feels like now they have to succumb to that or subscribe to that theology, I think that is a form of abuse, because now you're denying your core value to compromise this other person's desires. Like, that is divorce. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I can't even. Wow. Like if someone came to me like, I was with you for years and you said that to me, I'd be like, what? Like, what in the world? I'm sorry. I guess that would be the end of our relationship right there, because there's no coming back from that. Like, I feel like, even let's just say hypothetically speaking, I went along with that.
Yeah.
I feel like it's still, you'd probably still cheat on me anyway. Like in the sense of like, you probably won't even be telling me everybody that you're messing with. This is just like, you know, like newsflash, girl, he's still cheating.
This is like, just to let you know I'm opening the door.
Yeah.
And you be a little more careful, but
yeah. Right. So
I mean, I agree.
Yeah. And I think you know, maybe it does work for certain people. I know for me, oh no, I get jealous. I'd be like, like that would not work for me. I'd be like, no, like that would bother me. I guess, I don't know, right? Some people would accept it, but I do also think that, again, that deals with like not dealing with a lot of things that maybe you've dealt with. Because like, let's just say if I was like in a situation where, you know, I've been hurt before, so it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, at least this guy says he's going to tell me that he's going to cheat. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, okay, you've been hurt before, so now your standards are lower. Now you're like, you will accept those things because you think that that's what would happen in a normal relationship because that's happened to you before. You felt that pain and you don't want to feel it again. So you're like, you know what? I'm just going to accept this like ridiculous, standard. And then just hopefully this relationship will go better because at least this person is telling me type of thing. I could see, a lot of people like from dealing with some hurt, like they just start to accept things or like they don't want to be by themselves type of thing. Like they don't want to be alone, which is understandable. But, sometimes those things that you're not dealing with lead you to a crazy path. Now you in all these threesomes and you don't know how that happened.
Yeah. And I said this, I think the last episode, but for me, if it comes down to sacrificing myself, I would rather be lonely than to be stuck in a relationship and feel like I'm not my full self, or I'm being somebody else to please my partner. Yeah, because that's not how we're called to live, and you can't live to the fullness of who you're supposed to be if you're making compromises of the core values. Of course, you have to make compromises when you live with someone else. Like, there's going to be things that you don't want to do that you got to do. There's going to be, arguments that you have where you're going to have to accept defeat. But there are some things that, are core values to you that are just non-negotiables. Like, and you have to know yourself in order to identify those things too.
That's a good point. Like having those core values, those things that, are important to you, like maybe being family oriented is like something that has to, maintain. Maybe you like family traditions, I don't know. And like, that's something that you don't want to compromise. So I think that's a good point. Like knowing the things that, for sure is something that you want in a relationship, and then not from there, you could, make your like little list or whatever you do. And then from there, I'm not going to change these things for anyone.
Yeah, agree. So I guess in closing, so what I would say as closing thoughts is, in a quote unquote normal or good relationship, there are bumps in the road, there are ups and downs, because that's just how life works. But think about in your relationship that you should always strive to be honest with your partner, and your partner should always feel the ability to be honest with you. If you are thinking that, my honesty is going to jeopardize my relationship, that's a check to think about, okay, is there something unhealthy that we need to address? And maybe some conversations you're not comfortable with having with your partner. Maybe a place to start is by seeing a therapist for yourself, or even suggesting therapy for you and your husband or your boyfriend. But I always say, if you're dating a guy, it's just boyfriend, girlfriend, and you got to go to therapy, I'm just like, this is not the one, because that's me.
Yeah.
Because the problems are maybe too much. So I think so that's one advice. And the other one is to identify, within your good relationship, quote unquote, or early in a relationship, if someone has the potential of becoming abusive. There are, again, a lot of resources online, but be careful what resource you go to. Again, psychologytoday.com has some very good blog posts and some very good resources on how to find a therapist that is in your area. So explore those things and try to talk to someone. Don't jump the gun in being judgmental, and also don't be too cautious too, because there's that too where you could be like every little thing that a guy or a girl does and you're like, oh my gosh, is that a red flag? You have to find balance, and I think that's why it's probably useful to bring in a third party, a third neutral party, like a therapist, to get their thoughts on where you stand and how you should, what perspective you should look at the relationship in. And that is it. Do you have anything that you want to add, Gigi?
I definitely agree with all those points. I think those were great points. And I would just say, just be honest with yourself. Just really know like what you want and, you know, what things that you won't tolerate. And I think that's a good basis, just knowing the things that you want and then aligning that. And then, you know, you could be flexible with your list of things that you want, but like those core things, like.
And you will change. Yeah, you will change over time, and so will your partner. That's growth. That's what happens.
Yeah. Right. And that's a journey. And it's like, do you think about like, is this a person I want to be on that journey with? You know, like that should be someone that you like to be around. Let's just put it, should be as simple as I actually like you in my, like I like you around. If you like a person around, like that's good too. Like it shouldn't be where I'm like walking on eggshells around you. But yeah, I definitely think that those are important key things for this topic.
Okay.
All right. Well, I guess that wraps it up, right?
Yes, it does.
Awesome. All right. So this is A Word at the Table. Catch you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in.